Meanwhile, this week, thousands of passengers will face major train disruption as members of the RMT union at Southern Railway go on strike. The dispute centres around upgrades and changes to services which unions say will affect passenger safety and leave staff open to redundancy. Well, a short time ago, I asked Mick Cash whether the action was fair to passengers.
We're seeing more and more trains being overcrowded. We're seeing overcrowded platforms. We've got a number of instances now where we've seen passengers trapped and dragged along by trains. And it's a growing concern that we have and the industry's starting to have around safety of passengers on platforms, particularly around getting on and off trains. I don't see that this is about new technology. I think this is about Govia putting profit before safety, putting the interest of their shareholders before the interest of passengers. And enough's enough. We will suspend industrial action if the same arrangements we got offered in Scotland are given to us by Southern. The ball's over in Charles Horton's court and Go Ahead's court. Will they please not make that offer? They had the opportunity on Friday. I reiterate that point and request now, if they make that offer today, we will suspend action.
Well, that's what the unions say. We also spoke to a few Southern Rail passengers a little earlier.
Just like, because of everything that's happened and the government have stepped in, given the Southern government funding because of the lack of train crew. There's only like one train an hour and normally that's cancelled due to lack of train crew. So it's just like, they're not really a railway anymore, they're just a disgrace and just useless.
You can't go on like this. It's been months and months and months, and now train companies got the audacity to say they want to increase prices again. Come on, that's not good enough. We should get compensation.
I think it's a joke. It's an absolute joke considering we haven't had a good train service all year at all. There's always short staff. It's just a joke.
Well, the Rail Minister Paul Maynard has strongly condemned the action, saying that it will do nothing but cause more major disruption and misery for passengers. Well, joining us now to discuss whether these strikes work, Chief Executive of the Taxpayers Alliance, Jonathan Isaby, and The Guardian columnist, Dawn Foster. Thanks very much, both of you, for joining us. Dawn Isaby, to you first. The unions will say this is a last resort. The company is not listening to them. They have no choice but to take this industrial action.
Yes, completely, and I completely agree with them.
Dawn, that was just to Jonathan, that point.
Oh.
Look, of course they had a choice, and what they're doing is imposing huge amounts of misery and mayhem on thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of commuters across Surrey, Sussex and Kent over the whole of this week. And what it comes down to is who presses the button that opens the door. And frankly, if the driver is able to do that, then there's no reason for the conductor to have to do that. And it just strikes one as a throwback to the worst days of industrial turmoil back in the 70s. It's incredibly bad news for those commuters. It's bad news for the wider economy because there are knock-on effects all over the place.
I mean, Dawn, is that a fair point? Do you think it is a throwback to a different age and that this simply is boiling down to a dispute over who presses a button and it's actually causing untold misery for thousands?
No, I don't agree. I think everybody has the right to strike, and the people striking today, working for Southern Rail, are taxpayers as well. I think most people who travel on Southern realise that the company have completely and utterly failed to run the service properly, and the people who work for Southern are casualties as well. So I think strikes definitely do work as well. Most recently, we've seen the land registry strikes mean that the government have been forced to actually U-turn on the privatisation of the land registry. So I think they definitely do have a place in modern society. But I think the Conservative Party, still don't like strikes because actually they often win.
That's a fair point, isn't it, Jonathan? Sometimes strikes do win. We've heard about the land registry. It also seemed to work for junior doctors. But does it depend whether or not the strikers get the public on their side? If they have a case that the public backs, do you think, Jonathan, that really makes a difference?
No, I think the junior doctors issue, in the end, the BMA pretty much accepted what the government had offered. And again, misery on the way for people while that strike was going on. Union membership these days is now about half what it was 30 years ago. We've got to remember that over the last 30 or 40 years, all kinds of legislation has come into effect in terms of equal pay, workers' rights, minimum wage, all that kind of thing. So the days when the country had far more unscrupulous bosses, if you like, who were causing genuine problems where workers had a genuine grievance, have pretty much evaporated.
I mean, Dawn, do you think that rail workers are particularly badly done to? Do you think that their working conditions are such that it justifies striking? or are they being a little petty?
Yes, I think so. I mean, Southern Rail have admitted that they point blank don't have enough drivers. So if you don't have enough drivers, then the staff you do have on the train are covering for multiple people, etc. But also, what Jonathan said about us having more rights now is actually not true at all. Part of the reason why fewer people are in unions is because more of us are working on 0 hours contracts. We're working part time. It's very hard for us to unionise. So, for instance, if you look at Sports Direct admitted that they were paying a lot of people below the minimum wage, but the government have brought in a lot of legislation to union bust and also hurt our rights. So now, if we want to take people to tribunal, we actually have to pay fees to do it, and that's why unions actually, when they do go on strike, manage to win because they use people power and they work together.
And people power, Jonathan, has come into effect here. The government has changed the rules on strikes. I mean, this ballot was actually in April. It was before these new rules came into effect. But still, almost 400 members, they were all balloted. 321 of them voted, 81% voted, and 77% in total voted for industrial action. So what is clear that whatever the government says, this strike has got a mandate, hasn't it?
I'm glad you shared the numbers again with us there, Jane, because what you reminded us of the fact is that basically a little over 300 people are causing this untold mayhem and misery for the whole of this week for people across the southeast of England.
But just because there's only a few of you doing your job doesn't mean you're any less entitled to rights or rights to strike, does it?
Look, I think in this case the whole dispute is based on a very, very spurious argument over who opens the doors on a train. If technology allows a train to be staffed by fewer people, then so be it. That's progress. I dare say in the Middle Ages, the National Union of Monks would have been pretty upset about the invention of the printing press. That meant the monks wouldn't have to transcribe the Bibles anymore. But hey, the monks found something else to do and the technology took over and things advanced.
Dawn, isn't this the nub of it, that it's actually about the modernisation of the rail industry and that the unions don't want one person to be doing the job that two people currently do, although 30% of the rail network is able to function with just the driver being in charge of driving the train and the doors. So it clearly can be done. The union, there's also concerns that from the unions that it creates safety problems, but that has been denied by other bodies.
Yeah, I mean, the RNT came out and said that in the past they had been very welcoming of kind of driverless trains, etc. But now they do have concerns, and that's understandable, given the fact that Southern operate on kind of commuter platforms where people are often pushed very close to the carriages. And if you have a driverless train, then what you don't have is a driver who can see whether or not somebody is trapped in the doors and moving away from the actual place. But also, I feel that we're talking about the untold mayhem and destruction that the strike has apparently caused today. A lot of my friends commute on Southern, and all of them have said that actually the mayhem started way before the strike, and it's simply down to the fact that Southern cannot run their own rail. All they're looking for is profit, and they aren't actually even delivering a service properly. So the casualties there are both the commuters, but also the RMT members who are working for them. And actually the only people getting away with anything are Southern, who are trying to pocket as much profit as possible while not giving anybody a service.
OK, there we must leave it, I'm afraid. Dawn Foster from The Guardian and Jonathan Isaby from the Taxpayers Alliance, thank you both very much.